Hello, everyone. Today we are speaking with a very experienced professional, with Dr. Lonky. He's not just pulmonologist, internist, critical care medicine physician. He had tremendous experience in dealing with all sorts of healthcare issues. Recently, he published a book dedicated to obesity. It's called Outsmarting Obesity. His life goal is advocating for transformative healthcare. He is currently bridging medical expertise with authoritative insight. We're so thankful to have you with us today. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with
When you said experienced, I think you meant old.
Say it again?
I said you said I'm experienced. I think that's another word for old. I've been around the block.
It's the experience is very important, especially on the subject matter we're going to discuss, because obesity is it's a huge problem, connect to a lot of issues related to healthcare, especially to the lifespan. So I collected questions from all around the internet related to obesity because that's very important. And let's just go through the most vital one.
Okay.
The first question: should obesity be considered a disease or a lifestyle condition?
No, that's a good question. And I addressed that in the book, Outsmarting Obesity, right away. It is a disease. And I think that the American Medical Association has agreed that it is a disease, finally. It's not a lifestyle choice. And the book, gives a few examples of patients of mine. It's kind of filled with patient vignettes. Where a lot of people say, well, if they don't eat so much, that's why they're fat, so on and so on. And why don't you control your appetite, as if that was something easy to do? It's not a lifestyle choice. It is a disease, and I think we're at a crossroads now, and hopefully my book will resonate more and more and more. But if you try to look at it as a disease, as I do in the book, you say, okay, what's the disease? And what is common to obesity? I mean, what is present in every single patient who is obese? And, we use the term obesity. Unfortunately, we are stuck with body mass index, BMI, and we basically have come to the conclusion that anybody with a BMI over 30 is obese. We have 3 stages of obesity, the worst being what we call a morbid obesity, with people that have BMIs over 40. Well, let me tell you, I have patients with BMIs over 50. So just to put this in perspective, but what is common to all these patients, if you try to find what it is, it's one thing, and that is inflammation. So if you look at the blood, and I know people who've listening and watching to your podcast understand from COVID, from the pandemic, that there are inflammatory markers that show that there's inflammation going on in the body. It's not just a high white blood cell count. It is certain markers in the blood that say there's inflammation. Everyone who's obese has that marker. And it's true in the animal kingdom as well. So if we look at mice and rats and other animals that are raised in a laboratory, the one thing that's common is it's an inflammatory disease. That is to say, there is cytokine generation going on in the body You're not running a fever. You're not sick, but you are sick. You have these inflammatory markers, which explains a little bit as to why obese individuals did so poorly with COVID. Why?
Mhm.
Their pilot light was already on. They already had inflammation going on. Now you give them a new virus that engenders a tremendous response on the part of the cytokine system, and there's even more inflammation. And pretty soon they exhaust their ability to respond. They are immunologically deficient quickly, and they can't really respond to the virus. So other organs start to get affected. And in fact, most of the patients who didn't do well with COVID, the obese patients, they didn't succumb to just the pneumonia. They developed secondary effects, renal failure, heart failure, strokes, so on and so forth, things that again are tied to that inflammatory reaction. So yes, it is a disease state. It's very complicated, but
Mhm.
I think that you will find as I talk to you a little bit about this concept of what's causing obesity. Everybody wants to say how complex it is, but part of what I think the outcome of my book will be that we need to get down deeper in our understanding of what is causing this obesity to occur. What
Mhm.
is it? And so we'll talk a little bit more about that.
The, the thing is, like weight loss, weight gain, like everything related to the weight, it's always high in demand subject matter. People always trying to struggle one way and another with the weight because we know that a lot of things like stress associated with the weight gain in many cases, a lot of, as you said, inflammation, chronic conditions associated with the weight gain. Um, and the thing is, uh, obesity, you mentioned already the index, the body index that we can rely on to say, does this particular person has obesity or not? I know that people with issues related to weight loss, I know a lot of people who are not considered to be obese, but they still struggle a lot with the weight. They do have diabetes, but because of the genetics, because of the body structure, they're still not considered to be obese.
That's true. There are people who are considered to be obese who are
Not don't
really.
have
I
diabetes.
mean, you and I would agree. I think in my book I talk about Fred the hockey player. I have
Mhm.
a few hockey players in my practice that he's pretty muscular. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger at his prime when he was a bodybuilder would calculate out to be obese. Nobody would have thought that these bodybuilders are obese, not at all. And yet the BMI would be high. That's because muscle is very dense and it weighs more than fat and so on and so for the same density. I mean, a pound of muscle is the same as a pound of fat, but you know, the volume of muscle when it's so dense, it weighs more. But yes, but BMI is what we have. We're stuck with it, and I think that we can still. I think I quoted in the book. I quoted a Supreme Court justice who said, "I can't really define pornography, but I know it when I see it." Um, I don't think you can really define obesity, but you know it when you see it, and that's what I think most people are struggling with. You mentioned something, Evgenia, that I think we have to talk about. We are great at weight loss. We lose weight. I always tell my patients, I've never met anyone who can't lose weight. So
I have
anybody,
another question about it. Let's talk about it because that's a huge subject matter. Lots of people with obesity, they have a hard time losing weight.
no, they don't. They're being facetious with themselves, and they're fooling themselves. If I
Oh, really?
starve you, you will lose weight. We have the weight loss industry. Just think of this. In 1960s,
Mm-hmm.
the 14% of the population was obese. 14%.
Mm-hmm.
And John Kennedy, when he became president, said, "Oh my God, we're fat. We're out of shape." And thus the diet industry was kind of born in the
Mm-hmm.
60s. And we started with weight loss programs and weight loss pills and weight loss shots. Evgenia, the American population has spent over $3 trillion in weight loss products, weight loss plans, weight loss foods, shots, so on and so forth. And you know where we've gone? We've gone to 43% obesity. That's a failure. That's no the people that are real happy about that is the diet industry. They love it. At $3 trillion and you've gone nowhere. You've gone backwards. You've quadrupled your obesity. What's worse is kids, childhood obesity that's 16 and under has gone from just under 5% to 21%. 21% of our youth are obese. And we've spent a lot of money and we don't have problems losing weight. You know what we have problems with? Keeping it off. That's the problem. There was a show on television, The Biggest Loser. No, they took it off the air. You know why? Because all those patients gained their weight back. And they were on an exercise and diet program even after they went through their intensive weight loss. But it doesn't matter. Something else other than calories in and calories out and burning calories is dictating why we are obese. And if you don't recognize that, you'll never get to first base. You will go on a diet, you will lose weight, you will restrict your calories, you'll go
And then
to
you get back to the extra.
and then what happens is you gain it back.
So what do you think the major reasons?
Well, as I discuss in my book, and I try to lead people there slowly, is that we know that there are factors that we've learned from animal studies and then from studies in twins.
Mm-hmm.
Some people want to say, well, it's genetics. It's all genetics. Well, they're kind of wrong and kind of right. It has to do with your genes, but it doesn't have to do with the genetics. There's no fat gene. There are, in fact, 150 to 160 genes that you have and I have that dictate whether you're going to be obese or not, all the way from a gene that controls whether or not a fetus that's developing in utero in a pregnant woman, the new cell that's being born, is it going to become a muscle cell or a fat cell? There's a gene that actually controls that. Now, if that gene is switched over to make fat cells, that's going to make fat cells. You have genes that dictate whether you respond to leptin. Leptin is a hormone that your fat makes.
Yes,
Your
but
fat
all those genes, they can be manipulated. They can be turned on, turned off via environmental factors.
So
You will have some level of control.
yes, leptin is secreted by your fat. It tells your hypothalamus, hey, you've had enough. You're full. But if you don't have leptin, then guess what? What if you make leptin and it's not good leptin? It's almost leptin, but not quite. It's kind of damaged leptin. Well, you'll just keep making leptin because your brain is not getting turned off yet. What if your brain is not recognizing the leptin? Well, I just gave you 3 different genes that control whether or not you get full or not. There are, on the surface of genes, places for attachment of methyl groups, methyl, a carbon with 3 hydrogens. We call it methylated DNA. That's the most common change that happens on the surface of the gene. The gene is fine. You don't change the DNA. You change something stuck on the surface of the DNA, which either turns the gene on or turns the gene off. Those are called epigenetic changes. And the epigenome is vast. But something we know, obese individuals, particularly in twin studies, they have the same DNA. Identical twins have the same DNA. One is thin, one is fat. How's that happen? Can't be a single gene, because they'd both be fat or they'd both be thin. No, it has to do with these epigenetic changes that happen that turn the gene on or off. Now, you have an epigenetic signature, and I have an epigenetic signature, and it affects all our genes. You have a tumor suppressor gene. You have more than one. You have dozens of tumor suppressor genes. Sounds like a good gene to have turned on, right? What if some of your tumor suppressor genes are turned off? Well, that means you're going to be more sensitive to a carcinogen than I am. Therefore, not everybody who smokes a cigarette gets lung cancer, but some do. Not all people who are exposed to secondhand smoke get lung cancer. Not all women get breast cancer, even though you have the BRCA gene. I'm not sure what that's all about, because people get breast cancer with negative BRCA. I think we're struggling because we're at the genetic level, but we need to get to the epigenetic level, and that's so hard. You can't map the epigenome. It is vast. It is so big that all we can start to do is look at trends. Now, your next question would probably be, okay, what causes these methyl groups to attach? Well, that's a good question.
Aging, a lot of things.
Huh?
Aging, environmental factors.
You said it second. Environmental factors. So people, 30, 40 years ago started looking at certain compounds that caused epigenetic changes, that caused methylation to DNA. And that list has expanded. If you think about why we were not so fat back in the 60s, that's because my mom cooked eggs in an iron skillet. She never heard of Teflon. She'd never heard of nonstick cookware. But, we've got that now. Those are perfluorochemicals. And perfluorochemicals will cause methylation of DNA. They are associated with obesity in animal models and in humans. Son of a gun. How about nonstick, besides nonstick cookware, how about Scotch guarding our furniture? How about fire retardants in pajamas for kids? Sounds like a great idea, doesn't it? I mean, it should be. Unfortunately, we use chemicals that are hormone emulators, and they cause epigenetic changes. And they're associated with obesity. They're associated with a number of other illnesses, too. People say to me, it can't all be just one factor, epigenetics. And my question is, whoever designed this system, and it's a pretty fancy system we have going on in our bodies, just think about it. I mean, messenger RNA and DNA and all this other stuff that happens, it's pretty elegant. It's elegant in its simplicity. I mean, we only have one way to make a protein. That's it. You can't make proteins any other way.
Yes.
So, basically, our genes direct us and our bodies how to react to stress.
Yes.
Here's a good piece of information. You can't change your genes. That's genes with a G. You can change your genes with a J. Those you can change. That genes. But genes with a G, you can't change. You can't change your genetics, but you can change your epigenetics. That's where the promise is. The promise is epigenetic changes, although they stick for a few generations. So you may be overweight because of what your grandfather or grandmother did. The fact is you can peel some of those epigenetic changes off and reverse them. That's not easy. I'm not telling you this, not today, it's not. There's no magic bullet. Mm-hmm. But we know that they are changeable. Most of the changes come from changes in behavior. Isn't that funny?
By the way, let me tell you something. We have a big project we're working on, and it's dedicated to tracking as application that will track toxins coming from the environment, and plus other epigenetic things also. So we're working on it.
That's great, because we're working on a second book right now, and it's called Invisible and Inescapable. And basically, it is just about the toxic environment. It's about all the toxins in the air, in the water, in our food.
But if you will take into consideration how much we are getting now from you mentioned, from all possible things, from air, from the house care, self-care products, that's just absolutely mind-blowing. And the thing is, there are lots of, especially food industry, there are lots of questions regarding the evaluation of the toxin, the final impact, because every single company, they care about their own product, and the thing is, it's all sum ups, and nobody tracks the actual sum up, the impact of everything, and
well, it's almost impossible, Evgenia. It's really impossible. You know, a good rule of thumb for people is if you're buying food, you know, the food is the last piece in the puzzle. You know, air pollution is significant.
Yeah.
Here in the LA basin, we get,
and it's not just about carbon monoxide. There are lots of other. Yeah, it has nothing. Yes.
Yeah, so all the chemicals, about maybe between 15 and 30% of the pollutants in the air here come from China. Thank you, Jetstream. Okay, so there you go. So we could clean up our act, but if they're burning coal and the coal is dirty, we're gonna get some of that, and that stuff is in particulates. And we talk about particulate matter, and when you talk about particulate matter, that falls to the ground. It's invisible, and it gets incorporated into the water supply, so on and so forth, and it gets incorporated into algae. And certain fish eat the algae, and other fish eat the fish that ate the algae, and so on and so on, and it gets multiplied. And then we have a nice seafood dinner. And we don't have any idea what we're getting. People say, oh, mercury. Well, yeah, mercury is one of them.
Well, yes, it's just
stuff. And all the studies that have ever been done have to do with the fact that they test a single agent, but we are a chemistry set.
Oh, yes.
We're walking around with all of these chemicals, and they're just circulating around in our body, and they get sequestered, because once they're in our body, there's only two ways out, really. One way is urine, and the other way is sweat. That's it. They're not getting out any other way. And the problem is many of these things we were talking about earlier, like perfluorochemicals and so on and so forth, they are not water soluble. So they have to go to the liver, and the liver has to do its thing. It has to break them down into water soluble molecules so we can excrete them. But sometimes
the most terrible thing about all those not water soluble, you know, that we all know the brain is mostly fat, and all those things, it's been a study related to microplastic. And during the study, they were evaluating where in the body microplastic accommodates the most. And can you believe it? In the brain. Like usually children, little children who are exposed to microplastic, they have significant issue with development.
They do, and reasoning, and you look at the world. If you look at it through the lens that I look at it at, we're our own worst enemies because we're not educated. The public is not educated.
Oh yes,
and nobody wants to educate them, and that's why I wrote out.
We're doing.
I know, and we are. But
that's exactly what we're doing now.
we want more and more people to be involved with this.
I'm trying my best. You wouldn't believe it or not. I'm trying my best to promote the things that they do, because there are lots of things, and that's true. And the thing is, the entire healthcare system makes people blind. So the thing is, if the person gets to a specific healthcare settings and specific healthcare network, it's very hard to make a choice. So you already belong to a specific network that cover related to insurance and such and such. It's very hard to see all the options, very hard to see options available. And people sometimes get simply stuck with what they have, and they have no idea that there can be other solutions, non-invasive solutions.
There can be other solutions, and we talk about that in Outsmarting Obesity, and we're going to be talking about that as we're writing, Invisible and Inescapable. The fact is, you can't escape these things. There are 85,000 chemicals that have been approved for use in the United States. Now, you know who approves them? Not